I heard a good one, which is like a lesbian was asking on Twitter what it's like to sleep with men, and one of the best, one of the best lines was, um, "It's like when you ask someone to scratch your back because you have an itch, and they don't actually hit the itch, but they scratch around it."
Hey, welcome back. It's Across the Pond, episode number 4. Woo, 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 woo. My name's James, calling in from the UK, and you are.
My name is Jeff, and I'm calling in from Toronto, Ontario,
And we're
Canada.
alcoholics. No, so this is Across the Pond. This is our. Well, probably the only resource for movie reviews on the internet where we
It's the
discuss
only one you need,
the only one you
really.
need. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know any other ones. Um,
No.
and we discuss older films that we haven't seen before. We've never seen them. We watch them. We then talk about them for probably as long as the actual film is. And most people
Hmm.
turn off, according to the stats, after about a minute. But if you get past the minute, there's occasionally a joke.
And only the people who we know and have met throughout the course of our lives watch
Yes.
this. So this is really, I don't know who this is for. A general public? Not really. This is for people who hung out with us wherever we happen to be, and they don't want to write us on Facebook. They're like, I'll just watch them.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm still in touch with James and Jeff now after I've seen the episode of Across the Pond, which is the I'm just branding at this point. You're watching Across the Pond.
I mainly think it's for exes to watch me and then go, I'm happy I didn't go down that direction. You know.
Exactly. Or in my case, it's like, wow, he's balding.
Teeth look great,
I'm
though.
laughing.
Teeth look great.
Yeah, they're good. Those That's really been all I've ever had is walking faster than other people and a nice set of teeth.
Well, there's worse things you can go for.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're beautiful.
Thanks, James.
Before we go on to talk about this week's film, we're going to give a double review this week because I watched at the date that is today the new film on Netflix with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx called Project Power, which came out like last week. I watched that last night because I was hungover yesterday, and there's no need to do a video on that. It's just
Okay.
utter tripe. So if you had thought about watching the Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx film Project Power on Netflix, please just steer clear of that. You'll have 2 hours
Right.
back of your life where you can watch, I think that's about 5 Friends episodes. And I would suggest watching 5 Friends episodes over Project Power. But this week, we decided to review Citizen Kane, which is a film that we both haven't seen, the Orson Welles classic. And we're now going to show a clip and then come back and have a little chat.
Show the clip.
Are we going to declare war on Spain or are we not? Oh, Mama, here they come. Stupid I said, are we going to declare war on Spain or are we not? The Inquirer already has. You long-faced, overdressed anarchist. I am not overdressed. You are too. Mr. Bernstein, look at his necktie. Let's have the song about Charlie. Mr. Kane.
So there's a clip. One of the interesting things in this film is that, like, if you want to know the entire plot of the film, you only need to watch like the first 2 minutes because they give everything away, which is interesting. And that's that basically, Kane, Charles Foster Kane, young boy, I guess his mom. There's some kind of mining deed that she figures out that's part of her family, and she decides to hire someone to basically make sure that her son has a trust built up for him and send him off to school and take care of him for reasons I'm not totally clear on. It doesn't really make sense why she gets rid of him. But anyway, perhaps it's an abusive situation. I'm still not very sure. So he goes off 25 years later or something like that. His mother's, excellent stewardship of this mining deed and investments on his behalf have made him extremely rich. So he buys a newspaper or he starts a newspaper. It's yellow journalism. It's like the Inquirer. It's pretty bad. And he also in this paper he writes stories that are negative of the businesses that he owns. It's really weird. And then he kind of like builds his power and eventually wants to run for political office. He eventually starts to, I think, date and then marry the niece of the president of the United States. He runs for governor himself and ultimately fails as a relationship of his that he's been keeping secret with a amateur singer is revealed. They have a little thing together for a long time where he tries to kind of make her an opera singer. And then he eventually goes a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and creates this island kind of paradise. It's like a mountain paradise called Xanadu, which I think is in LA or Florida. I'm not really sure. This huge kind of castle. He amasses statues and famous pieces of art and all kinds of things. And just kind of the world kind of closes in on him. And he goes a little bit off the deep end when his failed opera singer wife tries to commit suicide. Or actually, no, she tried to commit suicide. And then he's like, okay, well, don't sing opera anymore. You're not great. Come live with me in Xanadu. She leaves him eventually, and that's what makes him go crazy. And this is actually the first thing you see in the film, which is he is holding this snow globe, and then he drops it. It crashes, but not before he says Rosebud. We don't really know what that means. And then the film is basically about this intrepid reporter who's going around trying to find out what the word Rosebud, this thing that he said just before he died, according to his butler, what it means. And so he interviews the opera singer that I talked about. He interviews the business partners and newspaper partners, the guy that eventually took over the deed and kind of was entrusted to raise Charles Foster Kane. He interviews everyone trying to find out what this thing means. And that is kind of the golden egg at the center of this film, the thing that keeps you watching too, because his life is so weird and wonderful and all over the place that you also want to know what this thing could possibly mean. So how is that for a summary? There's a lot going on in this movie.
Yeah, it's quite long. Did you like it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot. I get the impression you didn't like it that much, or did you? Really?
No. I tried to figure out the end of the film, but in honesty, towards the end when we talk about the rosebud and the rosebud is revealed, I was like, oh, that's what I sat around for 2 hours to get to the end for.
Yeah, I have to say, living in the now, in 2020, when there's a big reveal, when there's like a big Shyamalama Ding Dong reveal, it's usually like, it's really like, it really makes you want to like, I'm going to watch this movie tomorrow and the next day, and then I'm going to start a Reddit thread, and we're all going to. But when you get the big reveal at the end of this movie, you're kind of like, is that it? But I'm wondering, what do you think it is?
I actually enjoyed the first half of the film much more than the second half. I sort of zoned out when he apparently became a bit kooky and he started dating this, as you said, the opera singer who's not an opera singer, who he sort of just buys an opera house for and sort of forces lessons on her to make her better and all that kind of stuff. I thought the first half was quite interesting, and I thought there were some really interesting things running through, which didn't then come to the end in regards to him being essentially kind of a Rupert Murdoch figure in terms of being owning a number of papers, and almost whatever he said was the news. And he didn't take that any further, which annoyed me. You know, I thought that he was going to somehow use that power to get somewhere, or to change the world for the better, or for the worse, or however it was going to be. But it didn't really go anywhere, and it didn't really seem to show what he was trying to sell to people. But he kept saying that he was a people's man. He's here to stand up for their rights and against conglomerates. And his, as you said, he talked about his own company that he was sort of slagging off in the press. But I couldn't really work out what his point of being was. I don't know what he was trying to get at, what his aim was. Was it power? Didn't seem to be. Was it just being able to explain the news to everyone? Well, he didn't really. It wasn't in the same way as in that James Bond Tomorrow Never Dies or whatever, where you've got the media mogul who's trying to start a war so he can earn money from it. There was no kind of subtext of that going on. And so I didn't really know why he was bothering. They never really explained it. But he seemed
Yeah.
headstrong. At the start, he was headstrong. I have a vision. And then that vision was never explained.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're looking at is like, I mean, I hate that everything has to come back to Trump. But when you see this guy and he's got, his family system is messed up. He has failed but continued to succeed. He's shifty. He's a liar. He's a cheater. He's all this stuff. And this book came out about him, which I haven't read or probably won't read because you just have to watch a 30-minute interview and you find out everything about the book, is that his childhood was really rough, and his father and his grandfather were basically controlling his life and modeling a lot of really awful behavior that he would later kind of extrapolate from and just like terrorize other people with and all this stuff. So I think one possible interpretation for like what is his purpose, what is he trying to do, is like, when he says Rosebud, one interpretation could be that he never really had a normal childhood, a family, a loving kind of family system. And maybe he had a glimpse of that back, when, he was sledding around or whatever with his mom or dad. And however bad that was, it was still something that was kind of real and loving and authentic. And to have that kind of ripped away from you and to go after money, he possibly was amassing all of these important things and trying to make himself an important person and just continuing to fail in a way to kind of get back whatever love that he had when he was a small child in that kind of moment. And maybe that's why he says Rosebud at the very end, was just to, maybe that's what he was always looking for and trying to get, but failing to get through like buying a bunch of shit and trying to be elected, like love and attention and power and whatever. I don't know.
But they
so
don't.
That could be one way to.
They
look
never
at
really
it.
explained that. It's never explained, and also they didn't show his childhood very much. Even when he gets, so he gets shipped off to, is it Thatcher, who's some super wealthy banker who owns loads of different businesses. They don't show his childhood; they just cut to him being 25. So he goes from I guess like 11 to 25 quite quickly, and he's almost seems like a bit of a playboy, doesn't he? Like he's a bit reckless. I want to do newspapers. I have no interest in any other businesses. They don't really explain why, and then obviously it sort of turns out that he wants to, he says stand up for the little person, stand up for everyday people, but you don't really see that too much apart from a couple of clips of newspaper articles flipping and spinning around in an editing sequence. So yeah, that fundamentally, I struggled with that going through the film.
It's a really interesting theme with all the movies that we watch, is that we're not really sure if we should be rooting for the person we spend the most amount of time with in the movie. Like when you look back at like Chivago and I'm trying to think of the Wicker Man, like all this stuff, like we're really, I think this is like a classic case of just more of that. I was watching clips on this, and there's a couple things I want to say about like the kind of the heritage of this movie and like it's the way that it kind of changed filmmaking. But another thing is something that Martin Scorsese said, because if you type in Orson Welles and hit enter, like his 2-minute clip comes up, and what he said, which I totally agree with, was he's like, when I watched it, I wasn't really interested in Orson Welles. I wasn't interested in Charles Foster Kane. I was more interested in Orson Welles trying to make this movie.
Okay.
That's what I was interested in. And I kind of agree with that, because if after doing some reading and hearing about this movie forever, it was really kind of like improbable that this thing came together. This guy who'd never, I think he was in theater and radio before. He'd never made a film before. This was like his first kind of thing, and he was very scrappy and trying new things, and it just turned out to be a flop. And then it was re-released in the 50s, and it was a huge success. It's the story behind how the film came together is maybe more interesting than the story of the film and the stories in the film. But I think the film in and of itself is still, even though, I'm not sure if we want to root for this guy or whatever, the film in and of itself is like, to me anyway, and I like to watch movies, is like breathtaking. I was watching it with Maddie. We had to pause it a couple times to kind of like, to just, to be in awe of some of these incredible transitions as you go from scene to scene that would make like Edgar Wright, like Hot Fuzz, like blush, I think, because they were just so impressive. Like the way that shadows lined up with things when you go from one sequence to another. Or, even it's kind of lame today to watch someone kind of punch into a thing and go through a pane of glass, then go into the restaurant where we see, Singer. But to start at the bottom, climb to the top of the hotel to see her name, and then to go through, like, I've read that was like pretty innovative and just out of this world back then to make movies
And I
like
think
that.
that's probably worth saying as well, is that, you know, that it starts off with this exposition, which is a news report explaining his life, so you can instantly understand who he is, and it sets kind of him up as a character, and then goes into the film. And I was sort of laughing at the start. I was like, oh, exposition central, like they're shoving it in my face. But that, I would imagine, didn't exist prior to the... So that setup is, I'm guessing, the start of how that kind of stuff happened. And you get to Basil Exposition and Austin Powers, and it's not always like funny that someone comes in to explain the story, but, you know, we're looking at a film, as you said, from the late 40s. This stuff is, you know, they're doing it, you know, it's happening, and they're creating the new way to do things as they're going. You know, it's like music from the 60s and 70s, where they're literally like building the audio equipment around what's going on to try and keep up with what's going on. And, you know, we forget that, and the payoff at the end we probably think is a bit lame compared to, as you said, The Sixth Sense. But I don't know, back in the 50s, maybe that is a bigger payoff than we probably or assumed it may be. What I did think was really good in the film was the prosthetics, because they made him age, and to be honest, at no point did I think... Actually, at one point I was like, is that a different actor? Because it maybe black and white helps as well. I guess if it was colour, maybe it wouldn't have looked so good, but it did look seamlessly like he was aging, which I thought was quite good. Some of the other actors in it were almost a bit sitcom-esque, I think. It almost had that feel that the people around him, is it Bernstein, with little glasses, and then his a guy that I couldn't really work out the whole way through the film was his art critic, but was also like a right-hand man in the paper. And
it was like a business partner or something. I agree. I can't remember either.
And then some of the female characters, which you know, his first wife wasn't that well developed. I think that was the whole point. She was just meant to be kind of an establishment figure. And then he meets he meets this girl who's got a toothache, and he's just had is it horse and cart, has just thrown water all over his really nice suit, and she walks out and laughs at him. She's like, she goes, it's okay, I live really close here, and she just walks into the first door that she I was like, well, you do live really close. You live really close to that shop you went in, and you live really close to this guy that you're near. But he meets her, and what is an alleged or assumed affair sort of takes place, and she is a singer, or a wannabe singer, loves the Spice Girls, and he sort of becomes infatuated with her, and he just throws money at her, essentially, doesn't he, to make her the biggest star in the world.
Did you notice just how, I don't know a better way to put it, sexless this film is? Like, there's no hand-holding, there's no touching, there's no kissing, there's like, it's just devoid of any kind of warm human emotions or anything like that. Like, I think the most touching in the film is when they're all like dancing.
He kisses a girl in that dance scene.
Yeah, he does.
He kisses a girl.
It's interesting that the only girl that he kisses is one that's not his wife or partner as established by the film. It's some rando stranger.
And to be fair, you know, if we look at the time of when it was that kind of shot of just pulling a random girl and kissing her, and she's a dancer, a troupe of dancers in his office. It almost Wolf of Wall Street-esque of like, fuck it, I can do what I want. I'm Billy Big Balls. I've got loads of money, and all of his mates are like clapping. I mean, it had that Wolf of Wall Street feel to it. Wolf of Wall Street
That's
is
a really good call.
Slightly further down the line in terms of what they do in the office than this, but
yeah. So I talked about this with Maddie last night, because I was going on about how like this is everything that I just said, like important, cinematic, one of the best ever. Why? And I compared it to Spielberg, you know, and how Spielberg is also, well, what I was trying to say was that Orson Welles, he had War of the Worlds, he had this, and then as far as I know, he never really had another big hit again. Like, he never had another big masterpiece, whereas Spielberg, like, whatever, like, you know, he had Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, you know, you can kind of keep going down the line, and Orson just kind of peaked. And Maddie was saying that those are actually, those are like blockbusters though. They're like summer blockbusters. And that's true. Like they did make a whole bunch of money, but I still think they're like important pieces of cinematic history because they did. I mean, Jurassic Park, like
that's where someone said, "Hey, actually, we can do this on a computer," and Spielberg was like, "Mind blown! Let's do that. Looks amazing." And you watch Jurassic Park now, the graphics don't hold up in some of the scenes, but I remember going I think I was 5 years old, and I was just
like a small British boy.
I was like, "This is like, I cannot believe what I'm seeing." But yeah, you're right. And Saving Private Ryan, that beach scene, the D-Day beach scene, which is sort of, that is war film now, isn't it? That 20 minutes at the start is considered this the peak of what a war film is going to be like. But you're right. Is cinema some Art Nouveau thing that 7 people see at Cannes Film Festival or the Toronto Film Festival, and oh, it's amazing. I was going to do pretend glasses then, but I realised I've got them on. Now.
You've got your specs on.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's almost. It's why people will discuss art, isn't it?
Yeah.
So shall we complete this chat by reviewing?
We have to review it. Do
it. So first question to you is: would you recommend it?
Yes.
Okay. And want to give an overall score?
I would give it a 7.9.
Okay. Didn't you give that to another thing?
You got to go back. That's the thing. We're saying stuff to make you go back and rewatch the old episodes. There's new value.
I have to make a spreadsheet.
You got to go back.
I have to make a spreadsheet of what did Geoff say.
Okay, so now I get to ask you. Would you recommend it to someone to watch?
I wouldn't recommend it to anyone I know. Does that make sense? I don't think anyone I know would sit and watch it and be like, fascinating. The tables moved. I just don't know those people. I know people that like Hollywood blockbusters or that kind of stuff.
Right.
I do have friends that are into film. Even that, I don't know if they'd like it. But I would certainly recommend it if it's on the top 100 films of all time. And as you said, some people think it's the best, so watch it. But I think if I recommend it to certain people, they'd be like, "What's wrong with it? This is utter trash." I think I came into this. I didn't research it enough. So I came into it just literally turning it on and watching it. And my first impressions are I don't really understand what happened at the end. I didn't care for the characters, any of them. And therefore I didn't get that side of things in terms of the editing and transitions. I thought it was quite nice, but I didn't pick up on it. So overall, I sort of came out of it being like, well, that's one ticked off the list. I hope the next one is better. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence here quite a lot, I think.
What would you rate it?
I mean, I'd give it 6 out of 10. And then we've talked about some of the other bits and pieces about it. So I think I'd give it 7 out of 10 based on those kind of bits and pieces. Okay. But then we come back to would I recommend it? I probably would just laugh it off and say no. Read Wikipedia.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. That's it. That's all we needed to do on this show. Okay, so the thing we're going to be talking about the next time on the show is we're going to flip the script a little bit. Normally, we review an old movie that we haven't seen that's important or that's like cinematically, important. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to compare and contrast old Hollywood with new garbage Hollywood, because what we're going to do is we're going to watch a movie from the 1920s.
1925, yeah.
1925, Battleship Potemkin, which is not Battleship Mandy Patinkin. That was an old Battleship Patinkin. It never got made due to things that will remain in sealed documents. We're going to compare Battleship Potemkin with Battleship. Is it just Battleship?
Battleship.
Featuring Rihanna?
Yeah. So we're going to
of
compare
Umbrella fame.
1925 Soviet silent film, which is much like Citizen Kane, viewed as one of the cornerstones of cinema. against Battleship, which is a Hollywood film based on the board game Battleship, starring Rihanna.
Yep.
And you've got to be honest, I don't think anyone else is doing that on the internet.
No, I think this is fresh territory. This is new territory. No one's done this before. Maybe because it was a bad idea, but we're going to do it on Across the Pond next time you see us.
We are ideas machines. We will see you next time for probably the best review we're ever going to do.
Yep. Saddle up.
Rihanna versus a 1929.
So stupid.
I don't even know how we're going to do it. Oh, sorry, everyone.